The software development job market is getting more and more competitive day by day. So you as a developer have to stay up to date on the latest technologies so you stay relevant. So the question is now, which programming language should you learn to be ready for 2025 and to stay competitive? If you take a look at the Stack Overflow 2024 tech survey, you will see that currently JavaScript is the language that is in demand the most. So if the end goal is to enter a job market which has as many job offers as possible, then learning JavaScript in this case would just be fine because it's the language that's in demand the most. Keep in mind, obviously, learning JavaScript is not just learning the language itself. You have to learn the stuff around it. You have to know HTML, CSS. You have to learn a front-end framework because JavaScript is basically just a front-end language. At least that's what it was meant to be. It can do a lot more now, but that's beside the point. So it's not just learning JavaScript in itself. As you can see, HTML and CSS are actually the second place. It says programming, scripting, and markup languages, and HTML and CSS are just scripting and markup languages. But that goes along with JavaScript, so it only makes sense if you learn JavaScript that you have to know HTML and CSS. JavaScript in itself is not really that difficult to write. It can be pretty weird from time to time because there is certain behaviors that are just different from any other programming language, and that makes stuff pretty weird. But as a first language, it should be doing absolutely okay, and there is a ton of opportunities to get into different technologies once you know JavaScript. The issue here is that if you're looking for the highest paid position that's possible in any field of software development, then you're having the issue that you're entering a market with a lot of positions and a lot of people that know a language. Meaning that if there's a lot of demand and a lot of supply for a language, well, then you're not going to get the highest possible salary as a JavaScript developer, especially not as a junior developer in the currently pretty tough job market. Moving on, if we look at the second most popular language, you'll actually see that it's Python. And Python was by far the favorite for a couple of years, and there still is a ton of great tutorials out there to learn Python. The advantage of Python is that it is incredibly versatile. Unlike JavaScript, which was originally meant for only the web, Python is used literally everywhere. I think Python is even used in more applications or in more different applications than JavaScript is. Although JavaScript is definitely catching up, but Python is absolutely great. Anyways, Python is used in machine learning, it's used in data science, it's used in, for example, image recognition, it's in the web with Django and Flask as backend services, it's everywhere. So Python is absolutely amazing for learning it, and you do not have to learn all the stuff around it like you have to with JavaScript. JavaScript, you got to learn HTML and CSS. Python, you do not have to do that. You can learn special libraries for Python, of course, but Python in itself is more than enough for getting the basics down. Moving on, you can see SQL. Basically every application needs a database, so SQL is number one, or you're using a NoSQL solution like MongoDB. TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript, so it makes sense that it's in here as it's used in most professional areas, but you gotta learn JavaScript first before you can learn TypeScript. It's only an extension for JavaScript, so starting with JavaScript is totally fine. Our third most used languages in this case are Java and C#. C# was actually originally meant to be a replacement by Microsoft for Java. Obviously, they didn't quite make it, as you can see. And Java is used, just like Python, in a variety of applications. It was supposed to be the better C, and it focuses heavily on object-oriented programming. It's used everywhere as well. Minecraft runs on it, ATMs run it, backends run on it, everything runs on Java as well. Java is actually what you also learn in the second semester of computer science, at least that's where I am, and it's still incredibly relevant today. A quick Google search later, this is an article from 2022, but you might as well just read this right here. It's used in web application development, mobile application development, because Java is used in mobile. It's used for enterprise applications, IoT stuff, artificial intelligence, because Java is also quite fast, and game development. Game development actually focuses a lot more on C++, and C# instead of Java, so this is a little bit wrong in my opinion, but the other ones are definitely great takes. An advantage of Java is that it is not interpreted like Python or JavaScript. It's kind of interpreted, but it's a bit complicated because Java gets compiled to something called bytecode, which then gets interpreted by the so-called Java runtime environment. The JRE, for short, is different for each machine, so it has been built for macOS and for Windows and for Linux separately, but it has been built to make sure that the bytecode that it's interpreting is executed exactly the same way on each machine. So Java is like this weird hybrid thing, but it's incredibly great at making enterprise level applications. That's why literally every single large company has Java going on somewhere. Anywhere. If it's a supply chain management system, if it's any e-commerce platform, if it's interacting with a database, Java is there. The last two languages that I want to talk about in those most popular languages are C and C++. First of all, where's the difference? C++ is a superset of C, meaning that every valid C code is a valid C++ code, and then they've taken several other features and implemented in it as well, and then called that C++. So C does not have objects, but C++ does. So C++ is object-oriented. It has a lot more complex concepts implemented in itself, and this is the language that is mostly used, aside from C#, for actual large-scale games. Any large game that you can think of, like Grand Theft Auto 5, for example, is running on C++ behind the scenes. So should you learn that as a language? It's incredibly tough. I actually had the bright idea to start learning C++ at 14 years old. I can't code it anymore. It's just tough. I haven't done it in quite a long time, and it was really difficult. C is pretty alright. It teaches you a lot because if you understand C, you will understand the most other programming languages, or at least how they work behind the scenes. Because, for example, the Python interpreter has been written in C. So Python is basically just writing scripts that executes C code behind the scenes. It's also the reason why you tend to learn C as a first language in university. That doesn't necessarily make it good, but for the depth of understanding that you need for a computer science degree, C is obviously great. If you want to get into C++, get C down first and then move on to C++ because there is just so much to learn on C++. Now, I just pulled that up. If you go to w3schools.com, you'll see that this is their entire C++ guide, and there is a lot. Also, there are all those sections that are like subdivided, so it's a lot more than it seems. And if you just go to C itself, you'll see it's not even that much. It's probably around half of all there is with C++. The basics are the same, but the complex concepts are complex for a reason. So if you're a total beginner, I would not recommend starting with C or C++. Now that we've looked at all of those languages, which one should you actually learn as your first programming language if you have no experience at all? If I had to learn programming all over again, I would probably pick Python. I have worked with Python a bit. I'm usually a JavaScript dev, as I've mentioned in a couple of other videos, but Python makes it quite simple for a beginner who is not really in the thought process of breaking down problems for programming, and it makes it a lot easier for people who are not used to that. It's super beginner friendly, and I believe it's incredibly quick to get started, and there's a ton of great tutorials out there, so you really don't have to buy any books, you don't have to buy any Udemy courses, you don't have to spend any money to learn this. And having Python down gives you a ton of fields which you will be able to enter. What you absolutely have to keep in mind is if you look at the development survey on the developer profile section and you scroll down a bit, you'll see the developer roles. As you can see, full stack is by far, it's almost a third of all developers that have participated in this survey, meaning that if you're getting into development, there is a ton of full stack developers already. There's a ton of positions for full stack developers as well, but you are entering probably the most competitive market because there's just so many developers in general for full stack. So if you want to get into software development based on getting a position that pays as much as possible, then you should consider entering a section of software development that has a lot less available developers, because full stack is just the easiest by far to get into. So if you take a look at it right here, actually only 3.4% of all developers that have participated in this Stack Overflow survey are mobile developers, meaning that in theory, there are not as many positions for mobile developers. Obviously, that's not even in theory, that's just a fact. But if you know your stuff in mobile development and you find a company that is looking for mobile developers, your chances are a ton higher to land that position because there is just not as much supply for the demand. To recap everything now, it is a lot easier to learn the position that a lot of people are already working, like full stack developer, because there is a ton of material online, unlike mobile development, for example. But it is tougher to get started in the job market because there is just a lot more competition. In the end, which language you choose also depends on which direction of development you want to get into. If you want to be a mobile dev, if you want to be a web dev, if you want to get into AI, if you want to be a game dev, all of those factors play into which language you should choose first. But in the end, if I had to learn all the basics over again, I would go with Python. Not only are there a ton of programming languages to get started, there is also a ton of tooling that I use as a computer science student to keep my sanity. So if you want to keep watching, I'll link that video right up here and there will be a random video right down here. I'll see you around. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe and cheers.